Welcome. Today, we're uncovering a major cyber breach that targeted Donald Trump and J.D. Vance's campaign phones just weeks before Election Day. Was this an attack on democracy itself? Stay with us as we dive into this gripping investigation from a police investigator's perspective, revealing the full story behind the breach. Before we get started, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our in-depth investigative content. Trust me, you'll want to stick around until the very end, because we'll be revealing the potential fallout of this breach and its impact on the 2024 election. You don't want to miss it. As a seasoned police investigator, I've seen my share of crime scenes, gritty back alleys, high-rise offices, and even isolated cabins deep in the woods. But this one didn't have a tangible crime scene. It was buried in encrypted code, faceless attackers, and a virtual battleground stretching halfway across the globe. This time, the target wasn't some local drug ring or a rogue insider. It was bigger, more sinister, and exponentially more complex. The phones of Donald Trump, the 2024 Republican presidential candidate, and his running mate J.D. Vance had been compromised. The culprits? Hackers linked to China, lurking within Verizon systems. The incident was unveiled mere weeks before one of the most anticipated elections in U.S. history, and it sent shockwaves across the intelligence and law enforcement communities. Breaking into a campaign headquarters or hacking a campaign office email server is bold. But this was a digital break-in unlike any other. These hackers didn't just breach a network. They infiltrated the very devices used by Trump and Vance for their most sensitive communications. Campaign strategies, foreign policy stances, and possibly even personal vulnerabilities were now potentially within reach of foreign adversaries. It was clear from the start that this wasn't a random attack. The precision, timing, and high-value targets pointed to a state-sponsored operation. And China, with its growing cyber capabilities and fraught relationship with the U.S., was the prime suspect. It wasn't hard to figure out why Trump and Vance were targeted. Both men were vocal critics of Chinese influence in America, making them the perfect marks for an act of cyber sabotage. Investigating a case like this is nothing like chasing down a street criminal. There are no getaway cars, no witnesses in dark alleys. This was a hunt for digital breadcrumbs, bits of data, IP addresses, coded malware, and encrypted communications. The first step: understanding how Verizon's network was breached. It started with unusual traffic patterns, anomalies in data flow that could have easily gone unnoticed. But cybersecurity teams picked up on these irregularities, alerting authorities to what they initially believed was a minor breach. It didn't take long, though, to uncover the truth. The hackers weren't just snooping. They were targeting the phones of two of the most important figures in American politics. As the investigation unfolded, we found evidence of sophisticated phishing attacks, emails that seemed legitimate but were laced with malware designed to gain access to Verizon's network. The digital fingerprints pointed to techniques previously associated with Chinese state-sponsored hacking groups, particularly those known for targeting political figures, corporations, and government agencies. Why China? That's the burning question. However, for anyone familiar with the geopolitical landscape, the answer is obvious. Trump and Vance had built their campaigns on tough talk against China, emphasizing economic protectionism and national security. Beijing had every reason to keep a close eye on them. The hackers likely sought more than just inside campaign strategies. China's cyber operations have historically focused on acquiring intelligence that could inform foreign policy and geopolitical maneuvers. Imagine having access to confidential discussions about trade policy, military strategy, or diplomatic negotiations. Such information could shift the balance of power in Beijing's favor, giving them an edge in both public and covert arenas. The bigger concern? The potential to manipulate information. Imagine if private conversations about China's cyber activities were selectively leaked or even distorted. The public might never know the truth, and voters' perceptions could be skewed, all from a few strategically released emails or messages. As the weeks progressed, the scale of the breach became clearer and more troubling. There was a sense of urgency, an underlying tension that reminded me of chasing a high-profile suspect who always seems one step ahead. But in this case, the suspect wasn't a single person. It was an invisible network of hackers operating from unknown locations, using tools that were often untraceable. The implications of this breach were monumental. If these hackers gained access to crucial campaign strategies, it wasn't just Trump and Vance who were vulnerable. It was the integrity of the election itself. Imagine the impact of leaked debate prep materials, confidential policy discussions, or even evidence of internal disputes. The narrative could be controlled not by the campaign itself, but by unseen actors halfway across the world. Election interference isn't new. In 2016, we saw Russian operatives attempt to influence the presidential race through disinformation campaigns and hacks. In 2020, there were documented attempts by Iran to manipulate voter perceptions. But this breach felt different. It was targeted, strategic, and deeply personal. It was not just an attack on a campaign, it was an attack on the very core of American democracy. Every election cycle brings with it fears of interference, but this was the real deal. The narrative of a rigged election is powerful, and even the suggestion that foreign actors might be pulling the strings could destabilize public trust. For an investigator, this kind of case presents not only a technical challenge but a moral one. How do you protect a democratic process when the enemies are digital and their motivations are geopolitical? As we dug deeper, it became clear that this breach wasn't the work of amateur hackers. This was an operation with resources, training, and a clear directive. The digital fingerprints pointed to advanced persistent threats, APTs. Cyber units known for their patience, skill, and ability to adapt quickly. The attackers didn't leave much behind, but what they did leave was telling. We found traces of code that were similar to those used in previous Chinese cyber campaigns. The malware was designed not just to access information but to move laterally across the network, allowing it to jump from device to device. It was a complex operation that likely took months to plan and execute. Tracking these hackers is like chasing shadows. You think you've cornered them, only to realize they've slipped through another backdoor. But every piece of information matters, no matter how small. A server in Shanghai, a corrupted file with Mandarin comments, or an email domain linked to a known hacker group, each clue brought us closer to understanding the full scope of the operation. The breach sent shockwaves through the Trump campaign, but it wasn't just a political problem. It quickly became a national security issue, drawing attention from the highest levels of government. The White House, already on high alert given the tense relations with Beijing, saw this breach as more than just espionage. It was a direct challenge to American sovereignty. High-level meetings were held behind closed doors, with intelligence officials briefing the president on the possible extent of the breach. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The administration faced a tough decision: respond aggressively to China or quietly shore up cybersecurity measures to prevent further damage. Publicly accusing China of election interference could escalate tensions, but doing nothing would be a signal of weakness. For an investigator like me, it's frustrating to watch politics slow down the pursuit of justice. I wanted to move faster, dig deeper, and bring the culprits to light. But in cases like this, every move has international implications, and the consequences can be unpredictable. The Trump campaign didn't stay silent. Statements were issued condemning the breach as an unprecedented attack on American democracy. Campaign officials called for stronger cybersecurity measures, while also demanding accountability from the Biden administration. But there was a palpable sense of vulnerability. The campaign's digital security was compromised, and every conversation from that point forward was tinged with suspicion. Could the hackers still be listening? Were further breaches possible? The paranoia was real, and it wasn't just confined to campaign headquarters. It spread across the party and into the public sphere. Cybersecurity experts from across the country quickly weighed in, warning that this breach was not an isolated event. They emphasized that political campaigns are prime targets for foreign adversaries, particularly during election season. Experts noted that this attack was a clear example of China's growing cyber capabilities and its willingness to use those capabilities to influence foreign elections. The consensus was chilling. Without stronger defenses, similar breaches could become the norm rather than the exception. There were calls for new cybersecurity protocols, enhanced encryption, and real-time monitoring of campaign communications. For an investigator, it was clear that this case wasn't just about identifying the culprits. It was about setting a precedent for how America protects its political figures in the digital age. As expected, Beijing denied any involvement in the breach. Chinese officials dismissed the allegations as baseless and accused the U.S. of fabricating the story for political gain. It was the classic diplomatic chess match: denial, deflection, and counter-accusations. But we knew better. The techniques used, the targets chosen, and the timing all pointed to a state-sponsored operation. It wasn't the first time China had been accused of cyber espionage, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. The question was, how would the U.S. respond? The breach has undoubtedly added fuel to an already tense relationship between the U.S. and China. The stakes are high: diplomatic fallout, potential sanctions, and even more aggressive cyber measures on both sides. For the Trump campaign, the breach is not just a personal attack, it's a geopolitical flashpoint that could influence policy decisions for years to come. There are whispers in the intelligence community about possible countermeasures. Offensive cyber operations, targeted sanctions, and allied cooperation are all on the table. The U.S. has to send a clear message: interference in its elections will not be tolerated. This breach is a wake-up call for every political figure, campaign manager, and cybersecurity expert in the country. It's a reminder that the digital battleground is as real as any physical one, and the stakes are just as high. The breach of Trump and Vance's communications has exposed the vulnerabilities of modern campaigns, but it's also provided an opportunity to strengthen defenses for the future. The lessons are clear: stronger encryption, multi-factor authentication, and real-time network monitoring are no longer optional, they're essential. The U.S. must not only protect its political figures, but also ensure the integrity of its democratic process. As an investigator, I'm used to facing daunting challenges. But this case feels different. It's not just about catching the hackers, it's about safeguarding democracy. The breach has left a mark, not just on the campaign, but on the entire country. It's a reminder of how vulnerable we are, and how much we still need to do to protect what we hold dear. I don't know if we'll ever see justice fully served in this case. The culprits are likely thousands of miles away, hidden behind firewalls and state protection. But one thing is certain: the fight isn't over. The digital front line is real, and we're all on it, whether we like it or not. If you believe in the importance of cybersecurity for free and fair elections, make sure to like this video, share it, and subscribe for more investigative content. What are your thoughts on this breach? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to turn on notifications for our latest updates.